Hey, thanks for joining another episode of Setting Up a Fishbowl File. This will be part 3. The last one we worked on account mapping. And if you watched the last one, you saw that we ran into some error messages when integrating with QuickBooks. So in this video, we're going to address those error messages and see if we can solve them or otherwise get around them. So first of all, I'd like to go back to the accounting configuration, and we connected with QuickBooks in the last video and connected to accounts and decided which accounts to connect to. And then we tried to pull data from QuickBooks into Fishbowl and got some error messages. So let's try to narrow this down to a small subset of data pulled from QuickBooks. I'm just going to pull items and nothing else and see what we can get from that. So the error message we're getting is unit of measure. Abbreviation is already in use. Each Fishbowl has tried to import everything that it can. Bummer. Which is interesting because I don't know why that's a bad thing, other than probably some unit of measure conversion errors. Let's talk about this for a minute. So Fishbowl handles units of measure differently than QuickBooks does. Let's take a look at that. Set up unit of measure. Fishbowl has a unit of measure called each, and the error said it didn't like that the unit of measure already existed. So this unit of measure is unique in Fishbowl in that it works with serial number tracking. Now, QuickBooks doesn't have true serial number tracking. Fishbowl does. In the true serial number tracking world, we cannot allow each to be converted to a unit of measure that can be fractioned. We cannot fraction a serial number, so Fishbowl locks down the each unit of measure, so you cannot fraction it. Okay? So we may have a problem with, we may have a problem that we can't get around other than exporting the data and importing it into Fishbowl. Let's take a look at, let's just grab a part number. I'll just grab something random, see if we can find an each. So it says unit of measure of each. Okay. Subset, edit, and this can be purchased and sold, and it's purchased in each, and it's sold in each. So that, I'm guessing this one probably is not a problem. There's a couple ways we could address this. We could run Fishbowl in console mode and see if we can narrow down the error to a specific part number. I didn't see a part number specified in this error message we got. If we just uncheck all this. Yeah, there's no part number specified here. It's really general. It just says it doesn't like that it's trying to use that unit of measure. So we could either export all the items out of QuickBooks, reformat the data and import it into Fishbowl, which is what we probably do, or we can see if we can find a more specific error in the console of Fishbowl. Now, to run Fishbowl in console mode, we need to exit out of Fishbowl, shut down the server and Fishbowl Nexus, and I like to go here to the Fishbowl install. So we'll go C, program files, Fishbowl, server bin, and debug mode, the debug console, is nice. That gives a lot of information, especially when you're working with QuickBooks. So we'll run debug Eve. There we go. Let's see if it's going to run. Okay. So you can see, we see the language that's going on in the background. So we'll kind of push that to the side a little bit. And the server is up and going. So now we're going to log into the client. And password's 123. We've got another setting we want to change. I opened up the server, went to logging, and we'll put it in debug logging and say show SQL queries. We just want to see as much as we can. Server restart required for this. Okay, so we'll stop. And start. Hopefully we don't have to exit it out and restart it that way. I'll try just the little start there. And because we restarted the server, we've got to log back into the client. So we'll do that. And let's see what we can glean from debug once we've logged in. You'll see as we log in, the console's running. See if we can push that aside a little bit and watch it. As it's timed out waiting for a connection, it's not getting a connection here. Alright, so let's exit out of it. I stopped it, but I didn't exit out of it. So I'm going to go to the task manager, kill it. That's how much patience I have. Kill, kill, kill. Alright, how about we kill it like that? Boom, that'll kill it. Okay, let's run debug again. And we're doing this so we can see maybe some more information on that error message. If an error message doesn't give you enough information, then this is a good way to see more. Okay, should be up and going. Should be able to log into it now. See it running. Okay. Now let's go to accounting. Export. We're just going to do the same thing again. Well, I don't know why I clicked export. That was out of habit. Out of habit. Now, of course, you'll want to do this when only you're logged in and no one else is logged in. Okay. So the last thing that was run, we want to pay close attention to. The last thing was this SQL. And we just want to watch it carefully. We'll click Next. And it's going to run. Okay, we've got unit to measure conversion. Description factor from unit to measure multiply as multiple. So that's kind of what I suspected. It's looking at the multiplier of the unit of measure. Fishbowl is very strict about what you can convert each to. And I think in the QuickBooks file, each is probably converting to something that Fishbowl doesn't like. Now, these error messages are helpful, but they're not always exact. They don't always tell you exactly the problem. Sometimes they're a best guess, right? Because you read this error message, abbreviation is already in use, and you think to yourself, well, what's wrong with that? You know, I don't see anything wrong with that. Active flag code, dad, excluded from update. So that's different. It's looking at currency, code, default record description, integral is integral name, read only is read only. That might also be a problem as well. Fishbowl may think that QuickBooks is trying to change the each, and it's the each unit of measure, but it's read only. Unit measure type is unit measure type. Yeah. That could be another issue. It's talking about the unit measure type there. Let's cancel that. If we come over to the unit of measure and we look at, let's click new, and Fishbowl has these different types of units of measure. Okay, so we've got count, weight, length, area. If you try to convert Fishbowl to anything other than, or if you try to convert each to anything other than count, I think it's going to bark at you. Each currently has no other conversions. If we convert to foot, yeah, it's going to bark a little bit, but it might let us. Equals foot. This is a really bad thing to do, by the way, but I'm just going to see if it's going to give us an error. It didn't. That's surprising. It's really surprising. I don't want to do that. So, by looking at console mode, it didn't give us a part number. That's what we were hoping for. We were hoping that it gave us a part number. So, the next option, we could either trying to think here. We could dig deeper with our own queries, but that may just be a wild goose chase. Our surest thing is to export the data, reformat it, and manually import it. And that is something I want to show because I haven't done a video on the part product vendor pricing spreadsheet yet, and that's something we need to look at. I need to do. So I'm going to come here and say Excel, export all items, create a new worksheet. Yep. And let's get this data out of QuickBooks. Here's our worksheet. And what we need to do is convert this format here into a format that Fishbowl will accept. There's a couple different ways to do that. We can go to Fishbowl, go to General and Import Mapping. You have to install this, and then create our own part product vendor pricing import mapping from the file that we have here. Now I don't know where I put it, so let's save it. File, save as, save it to the desktop. We'll call it items from QuickBooks. Items from QuickBooks sample file. Okay, so a couple different ways. We're in the import mapping. We'll go to desktop, find my items for QuickBooks sample file, and then we can map each one to each column. Looks like there's a little bit of troubleshooting to do here. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. Yeah, let's delete this. Now it should see these. I'm not sure why it's not seeing these. We selected the file, and we should be able to just select the column headers. Let's try this. I don't know if it's saying we can only use CSV. That's something to try. Let's try just CSV. File, save as CSV. I thought in a recent update it allowed us to do something other than CSV. Oh, look here. I think that might give us a problem if we have two tabs. Let's delete that tab. Okay, let's try that again. Desktop, CSV, open. You see it's pulling it in already. There we go. Okay. So now we just match fields with what Fishbowl needs. Item, description, unit of measure, account, accumulated depreciation, active asset, bin, COGS account, price, quantity on hand. Okay, so this is a little bit different. We've got unit of measure and unit of measure set. Let's take a look at which one we want. Fishbowl wants the abbreviation. So unit of measure set is not the abbreviation, and this isn't quite exactly what we need. So we need to change this data before we can import it. So Fishbowl wants just the each, but yeah, QuickBooks is giving us way more than Fishbowl wants to accept. So we're going to do some creative things in Excel here to change that. We want just what's in the parentheses. We don't want what's outside of the parentheses. So I'm going to go to Data. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to delete or insert some more columns. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go to Data, Text to Columns. First I have to accept that. So Data, Text to Columns, delimited. And I'm going to say, let's make the delimiter parentheses. And finish. Okay, so that's one step. And I want to get rid of that formula, so I'm going to copy and paste values only. And then I'll come here to Home, Find and Select, and let's do a replace, close parentheses, with nothing. Replace all, and we're clean. So that's what Fishbowl wants, is it just wants the abbreviation for the unit of measure. Box of 100. Notice in the unit of measure, box of 100 came over without a problem. It was the each it didn't like. It did not like the each. Now when we use this import, each will be just fine. So I'm going to call that unit of measure, and we can get rid of that. And we can get rid of this. So we've got units of measure. Some of these parts don't have units of measure. QuickBooks will assign each, the unit measure each, to anything that's blank. So let's keep an eye on that and be careful with that. For ease of use, I'm also going to highlight this, go to View, Freeze Panes. Well, unfreeze panes, then freeze panes. Looked like it had the top pane frozen, but not the left pane frozen. Did I freeze that or not? Oh, okay. It's got this other pane frozen. It's got this double pane frozen here. I don't like that. It's not how I like to do it. Let's get rid of that. Unsplit. There we go. Okay. Now I want to freeze the panes. Perfect. Makes it easier to work with. Okay, so we've got a manufacturer's part number and an item number. That might be a problem. Let's look and see what this is. So the manufacturing part number is the vendor part number, and the item is probably going to be your part number. So because we have some things, I'm starting to look at this and I'm starting to realize that we really need to massage this data a little bit more before we can put it into Fishbowl. We've got COGS accounts, asset accounts, sales tax code, okay. So some of this will go in perfectly fine. Some of it won't, like this part type here. QuickBooks has fewer part types than Fishbowl. Fishbowl has 5 part types, or maybe it's 6. It's inventory, non-inventory, service, labor, overhead, capital equipment, internal use. Yeah, it's like, hey, shipping. You know, it's got a lot of part types. And on the PPVP, on the part product vendor pricing import, it uses a code, an ID, rather than a name. So this here needs to be redone into the code. So when you're doing this, go to File, Import, Part Product Vendor Pricing, Next, and print out these instructions. I've done this so many times, I have these memorized, but right here is the item IDs. So to convert the service is 20, it said, right? So all service needs to be type ID 20. And the Fishbowl field is type ID, or part type ID. These instructions right here tell you what the column names are as well. So instead of using the import mapping, we are going to prepare the data a little bit more. So let's go to another option. Back here on File, Import, Part Product Vendor Pricing, where we just were, we're going to do a template. We're going to create a template. Okay? I'm going to export a template onto the desktop, Part Product Vendor Pricing template. We'll save that. It says, would you like to open the file? Yeah, love that new feature. So here are all the columns for the part, product, vendor pricing import. What this imports is parts, it imports products, and it imports vendor part numbers. Now, in Fishbowl, you have a part, you have a product, and you have, let's pull one of these up, and you have vendor part numbers. Okay. You also have bills of material as well, but that's not a part number. It's a bill of material number. So in Fishbowl, you can actually have 4 units of measure. The part unit of measure, the part is what you stock it in. That's your stock. That's how you identify the part in stock. So when you do a physical count, the unit of measure you use for part is the unit of measure to use. When you purchase the part, you'll use the vendor unit of measure and the vendor part number. When you sell the part, you'll use the product unit of measure. Okay, a product is just a part that's for sale. That's all a product is. And this adds some more functionality, some more ability in Fishbowl. In QuickBooks, you have a sales description, but you don't have a sales part. In Fishbowl, you have a sales product number. In QuickBooks, you have your items, right? Everything's an item except there's a manufacturer part number. In Fishbowl, there's a manufacturer part number, your part number, and even the customer's product number. Okay? And that's actually one more thing. There's also the customer part number that's stored under the product number. You want to go even further. You also have UPCs and SKUs in Fishbowl, and it can read them all. If you're in the barcoding world, Fishbowl only needs a UPC or a SKU in here, and if you're scanning a barcode, it doesn't matter whether it's the vendor part number, the part number, the product number, the UPC, or the SKU. Fishbowl will read them all and know what they are, as long as you have the data in the system in the right place. So anyways, the spreadsheet, I think it's important to understand parts, products, and vendor parts in Fishbowl to set up this spreadsheet correctly. That's why I took a little segue there. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. And basically what we want to do is we want to convert this format into this format. Okay, so we could use a VLOOKUP formula, or we could use copy and paste. We probably want to start out with copy and paste and then progress to a VLOOKUP maybe. Let's continue with these item IDs. Inventory part is type ID 10. So I'm going to go to Home, select, replace, and we'll just do inventory part, replace it with type ID 10. Okay, close. Now, in QuickBooks, an inventory assembly type part converts to just a regular inventory type part in Fishbowl. Now, the reason is, you'll notice if we go to Fishbowl, there is no assembly type part. But what Fishbowl does is in the advanced search, it says, show me the parts that have a bill of material. Okay? So, depending on what part is in the bill of material, Fishbowl will identify that part in a different way. So you don't need an assembly type part in Fishbowl. It's just an inventory type part that has a bill of material. That's either a finished good or a raw good on the bill of material. So that's just how it converts in Fishbowl. Now here we've got non-inventory 10. I don't know what. Oh, I replaced that with 10, so that used to say something else. It used to say non-inventory type part. So I hesitate on this because Fishbowl's non-inventory may be different than how this non-inventory was being used. This says grease and custom work. Okay, so custom work in Fishbowl would actually be labor or service, depending on whether it's being done internally or whether it's being done externally. Custom work sounds like maybe even something that you are performing for your customer. Also, if it's something you're performing for your customer, then that's more of a service. But custom work in Fishbowl is not a non-inventory type part. Absolutely not. A non-inventory type part in Fishbowl is something that's tangible, that has weight, that can sit on the shelf, that can be picked and packed. Okay? So a non-inventory type part in Fishbowl is a lot like an inventory type part. The only difference is you've decided not to track the part. Okay? You've decided that a non-inventory, that this item, for whatever reason, is not significant enough to be considered. And it's not worth your time. You've decided that it's not worth your time to do a physical count on it. It's too insignificant, right? You've decided that you don't want it on your balance sheet. If you don't want it on your balance sheet, then it's a non-inventory type part. So a non-inventory type part and an inventory type part are both tangible items that you can physically pick up. An inventory type part is something you track quantity and track value on the balance sheet. And you even track the location of it. That's an inventory type part in Fishbowl. A non-inventory type part does not have a location that you track and does not have quantity that you track, and it's not considered an asset value on the balance sheet. It's just expensed when you receive it. Okay? So this custom work, I'm going to call it, let's call it labor. So labor is 21. This grease, okay, we could call grease a non-inventory type part. Non-inventory type part is 30. FB item, we're going to leave that alone. That's something that Fishbowl created. And also notice it says do not modify, required by Fishbowl. So that's something that's in QuickBooks. I'm going to delete it off of this spreadsheet because we don't need it in Fishbowl. Before I delete this, let me just comment on it. When you start using Fishbowl, your item list in QuickBooks becomes obsolete. Fishbowl does not update your quantities on your item list. Okay? It sends over positive and negative journal entries to the asset account. But your quantities in QuickBooks are no longer applicable. Okay? So then what Fishbowl does is when it creates an invoice in QuickBooks, it maps all of the part numbers to one part number, and that part number is what you're seeing here, the FB item. So on the invoice in QuickBooks, the part number is going to be FB item, and then the description will be the Fishbowl part number dash description. Okay, and we can talk about that in another video. You can and you should edit your invoice screen and edit your invoice template in QuickBooks. That's something you should do when you start using Fishbowl. is edit that template and edit that screen so when the data flows over and you send the invoice to your customer, it looks nice and they're not seeing this FB item, right? You want your customer to see the part number and the description. So, okay, so that's enough on that topic. We'll cover that more later. We'll delete this. And these things that say do not modify, the FB stands for Fishbowl. It means Fishbowl created that. We don't want to put that into Fishbowl. Okay, so finance charge, that probably, yeah, converts in, most likely into Fishbowl would convert into a service. Finance charge. Finance charge on overdue balance. I don't know if that would ever be used from a Fishbowl perspective, because in Fishbowl we don't create invoices, we create sales orders, right? Fishbowl creates the invoice in QuickBooks. So if you're adding a finance charge, that's probably going to be done from a QuickBooks user in QuickBooks. And this most likely may never be used in Fishbowl. I'm going to leave it just because. I don't know. I'm just going to leave it for right now. Freight. Okay, so in QuickBooks that shows as another charge, but in Fishbowl that shows as a shipping type part number, which is type ID 60. And the utilities is an overhead type part in Fishbowl, which is type ID 50. Let me just double check that. Pretty sure it's type ID 50. Nope. Overhead is 22. 22. Okay, now sales tax in QuickBooks it shows up as an item. In Fishbowl it doesn't show up as a part number. There is a completely separate table for tax items. If we come here to accounting and look at tax rates, that's where Fishbowl holds that, and Fishbowl doesn't have a tax type part. Okay, if you need to add a tax item, which is a rare thing, you can do it from the sales order screen right here. You can add a tax rate as a line, okay, but you'll still use one of the tax rates that you have in there. So Fishbowl doesn't really have a tax item per se, it has tax rates, okay, that you can put on the line in here, or also Fishbowl will calculate the tax down here automatically as well. So this sales tax right here, we're just going to delete it. Just boop, gone, okay. All right. This active status translates to active, true or false is what it does. So we'll replace let's replace not active first. Not active with false. Okay. And then we'll replace active with true. Done. Close. And I'm going to change the order of this because that's the order that Fishbowl has it in. So I'm just going to cut and insert. Now it's becoming a little bit more like the part product vendor pricing spreadsheet. Part product vendor pricing spreadsheet has different column headers. It says part number and part description. Okay. All right, and purchase description and part description. I'm going to keep my eye on that. Quantity on hand in QuickBooks is imported in a different spreadsheet. It's the Add Inventory spreadsheet. So we've got this saved as items from QuickBooks sample file. I'm going to save it again under a different name now that I've changed some things. I'm going to save it as PPVP prepared from QuickBooks. All right. Say delete that. That cost will keep. This cost is going to go over here by the vendor. Preferred vendor in Fishbowl is called default vendor. Tax agency does not import on this file. That's a separate import. Reorder points. Fishbowl does have reorder points, but once again, reorder points do not import on the part product vendor pricing. They import on a different spreadsheet. So I'll take those off. Okay. Now notice I have a new spreadsheet. I still have the spreadsheet with all of this data. So I can clean this off of this spreadsheet because I still have it on another spreadsheet. Quantity, price break, bin location, shelf. This is all great data to have to import into Fishbowl. But we'll take it off of this one. Let's see if we have any serial numbers. No, okay. Customers. The rest of this is just blank, so we might as well just get rid of it. So I'm just cleaning this up, preparing it to be like the part product vendor pricing format. Okay, that's what we're doing, is we're putting it in that format. We've got part number, part description, purchase description, and I'm keeping an eye on. This might actually change. So this purchase description is what shows up on the purchase order. And there are some slight differences, it looks like. Center pedestal, PD center pedestal. I'm almost looking at this to be product description, and this the part description. Remember, Fishbowl has parts, products, and vendor parts. So we'll put the product description over here. Product description, I'm going to add another column. Call this product. These are your parts that are for sale. So we're going to carefully go through and pick through this and say, okay, what's for sale, what's not for sale, right? Sales tax code does not go, well, actually it does. Sales tax code. Cut over here on the product. Insert. You'll see on this part product vendor pricing spreadsheet, we've got this product area right here. Right? See everything that begins with product, product description, product details, product price, product. And then it says this product taxable field. That's a true false value. So that's going to change a little bit. This sales tax code, we could convert to product taxable. Product taxable. And I'm going to turn filters on. So that makes it easier to work with. Come over here to product taxable. See, we have we've got one that just says none, so that would convert to false, and the rest of this is probably true if there is a product. So we have to go through and decide, okay, which parts are for sale, which aren't for sale. Now this unit of measure goes over here to the left. Part type, let's just look at this real quick. This is our template to follow. So part details, unit of measure goes here. Okay, there's our unit of measure. Oh, I like this. Karen delete. You're going to have things like that, right? Okay, we'll delete that. Upfront deposit. Don't really put that as a line in Fishbowl. You can take upfront deposits in Fishbowl, but don't really put those in as a line. I would take that one off. Okay, so down here we've got some areas that are blank. Now, in QuickBooks, these are product categories. Fishbowl has product categories. That translates to the Fishbowl product tree, but this doesn't go in on this particular spreadsheet. So we want to clean this up. Really what we want is just these part numbers without the pool covers colon. So I'm going to delete this line, and I'll select that, come up here, do find replace, and type in pool covers colon, replace pool covers colon with blank, and boom, that's gone. Need to do the same thing with pumps. Pumps. Pumps colon. Okay, close. Screws. Place that. Screws colon. Screws colon. Replace all. Anything else? Nope. That looks pretty good. Now I don't know what these are. That's unfortunate. They don't have a description. Let's see if they have a description over here. Alright. Have it under the product description. Manual cover, power manual, vendor part, preferred vendor. Now these don't have a vendor, so I think what I did is when I was moving these around, these are the items that are manufactured. Yeah. So we don't buy them. There's no vendor for it. It's the higher price. These look like the ones that we manufacture. The Ultimate, the Power Track, Power Manual, the Manual Cover. So I'm going to put those there. And yeah, I didn't like the description that was there, so I just replaced it. Finance charges on overdue balances. Freight charges to customers. So these are for sale, for sure. These are our finished products that we manufacture, so we want those right there under the products. Now, if you sell these screws as replacement parts, we can have them in here as products. You know, I'm sure there's replacement parts throughout here that you sell, like these pool covers. You know, that sounds like a potential replacement part. So you'll have that in there as a product. And we've got price and cost. Okay, that's good. So the sales price, we want that next to the product area. So we'll cut that, insert that over here. That's the price. Now, okay, that's going to help us. If there's a sales price, that means we sell it, right? So anything that's a 0, I'm going to leave blank, but if it has a price there, I'm just going to say, bam, we sell that. Oh. Excel didn't like that, did it? So let's format that to general and try again. Equals. There we go. Now here's a nice little trick in Excel that is funny. It's just the little things that blow your mind that you love. We want to copy this formula all the way down. And say you're working with a spreadsheet that has 5,000 lines, or 2,000, or thousands of lines. I'm working with just a dinky little spreadsheet that has a couple hundred lines. But it's still a cool trick. Hover over the little green square right here and double click. Shazam! Woo! It's like magic. Populates it all the way down for you, so you don't have to click and drag and drag and drag and drag and drag through thousands of lines. Kind of nice, huh? Cool little Excel trick for you. Okay, so these ones with costs don't have a vendor. So these aren't purchase costs, these are asset values. The asset values import into Fishbowl on a different spreadsheet. Those import using the Add Inventory spreadsheet. On the Add Inventory spreadsheet, you'll have your part numbers, your quantities, your locations, and your values. So these ones are a bit different. Let's sort this right here. So those are all your purchase costs from the vendor. That's great. Then all these costs without a vendor are probably things you manufacture, or yeah, we've got some things like freight, utility, and things like that. Installation labor. There's a column that we need to add here. Insert active. That's active. Okay. STD cost. It's not what you think. It stands for standard cost. So in the previous video, in this file, we selected this file to be the average costing method. So this file is the average costing method. But in this spreadsheet, it has a spot for the standard cost. Okay. Now, you could put a standard cost in on an inventory type part, but Fishbowl's not going to use it. It'll just act as a reference for you. It doesn't hurt anything, okay? But really, what Fishbowl uses the standard cost for are for the items that are not inventory type items. So labor would have a standard cost that applies to that unit of measure. Okay? Wages, assembly, builds. Yeah, this description is kind of crazy. Let's see. Let's see what the other description looks like. Direct labor per build. I like that better. I don't think this really translates into what we're doing in Fishbowl. This probably made sense in the QuickBooks world when it was in there. It doesn't really make sense anymore in this world. Builds, yeah. So I would take this and replace that. So this is interesting. It's saying direct labor per build, but right here it's saying per hour. Doesn't really match, does it? Maybe if I change this to direct labor for build, really I think the best thing to do is just call it direct labor, period, leave it at that. And what this would be is, you know, whatever you want it to be, 20 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour, depending on the technician, right? And if you have different labor categories with different levels, you can have more than one labor type part, okay, with a different rate. So remember in the last video we talked about labor and how Fishbowl uses that. So it goes on the bill of material, which rolls up into the work order, and then when you finish the work order, Fishbowl will take the quantity of your labor multiplied by the cost of the labor, okay, and credit that amount to this account right here, all right? And then it will combine that labor with the rest of the raw goods, sum all of that up, and debit the finished good, okay? So your labor expense is getting a credit, which shows up as a negative on your P&L, because it's taking it off your P&L and it's temporarily putting it on your balance sheet. And then once you sell the finished good, at that point Fishbowl will take that combined with everything else that went into that finished good and credit that from the asset account and debit it into your cost of goods sold account. So it only hits COGS when it's actually sold, not when it's consumed in manufacturing. So standard cost, let's see, your custom work, you know, maybe that's a higher cost, I don't know. Oh, that's interesting, I just noticed something. Direct labor right here, it's type ID 20. Type ID 20 is service, so that's not right. That should be 21. Type ID 21. And remember, to see these type IDs, you go to File, Import, Part Product Vendor Pricing, Next, and just blow this up a bit. You'll have this printed out. So labor is 21. Service is 22, overhead is, or excuse me, service is 20, overhead is 22. All right, so we've got labor. This custom work, I would say, could almost be a service. It kind of sounds like something like installation or something like that, right? And the grease, bucket of grease, freight, we'll call this freight in here. So that's what goes on the PO. And to the right under product, we can call that freight out. Freight charged to customer. And there we go. Okay. Utility charge per build. We don't sell that, so we'll take that off from the product area. Utility charge per build, $25 per build. Let's see what the unit of measure is for that. No unit of measure. Okay, so if it's per build, we could have that be in each unit of measure. But if we make it in each unit of measure, we're not able to fraction it. Look at this here. It says $709 per 29 builds equals $25 per build. So we could say, all right, standard cost is $25 and make that unit of measure each, you know. But what if it's different? I I don't know, usually utilities we just want to leave it as standard. So I hesitate using each because once you select each, you're married to it, and it's not very flexible. It's like, oh, I almost want to make a unit of measure called build, you know? Yeah, hour build. I'm gonna call it build. The freight unit of measure is each. Finance charge, probably each. Doesn't have a description. Does it have one over here? Yeah, it does. Let's move these descriptions over. Oh, didn't like that. Let's do it this way. That formatting is getting me, isn't it? Go to general equals. There we go. Installation repair labor. Installation initial labor has a sales price, so it's called labor there, but okay, good. That's really a service. Repair service, repair service. Yeah, it's mapped to service accounts. Okay, so let's just clear our filters. We'll go here. The data clear, that clears all of our filters, leaves our filters there. And we were putting in standard cost, that's right. So let's take out the inventory type parts, focus on these, make sure they have a standard cost. Grease, if it's a non-inventory type item, and we just want to expense it, and then use that in the consumption, then let's look at the cost of it. The cost is 25 cents per what? 25 cents per, oh, okay, it's ounce. So 25 cents an ounce. We don't need a cost on freight because that is different every time. Finance charge on overdue balance, that's going to be different every time. Installation repair, let's see what the cost is on that. Looks like that's different every time. The standard cost may be different, right? We may want that cost in there. If we put that on a sales order, the price will credit income and debit AR once it hits the invoice. But I'm wondering if there is another transaction that's associated with this cost, like a credit to the expense and a debit to COGS or something, you know. I'll have to look at that in another video. I'll have to test that. Unfortunately, we don't have these parts in here right now, so we can't test it. But, and that's, you know, that's the beauty of using a test environment and setting this up in a test environment before you go live, is we can test these transactions out, okay? And see what it does, and then change it. If we need to, we can change the standard cost later. Absolutely. Yeah, there's no problem changing that standard cost later. Now, the part type ID is difficult to change later. We want to make sure that we get these right before we go live, especially the unit of measure. The unit of measure is an awful thing to change after you're live. Just awful. Terrible, terrible. So we want to make sure that units of measures are correct before we go live. Spend as much time as you need to getting those units of measure correct, because this is probably the biggest reason a file needs to be rebuilt, is the units of measure were not correct when starting out. So I want to make sure those units of measures are correct, they're tested thoroughly in the testing file to assure they're working the way that you need them to work before you go live. Okay, so we've got our units of measures, our part type IDs, and our standard costs for the items that needed a standard cost. We've got our accounts. We'll look at that here in just a second. Accumulated depreciation does not translate into anything in Fishbowl, so we'll delete that. And notice each step, this spreadsheet is becoming more and more like this one. It's looking more and more like it, right? Part type ID, part type ID, active. So we want to rename these accounts. Let's see here. So this one, Fishbowl calls the asset account. And let's just push this over a little bit so we can see this. Track slot, track serial, here we go. Asset account, we could just copy and paste this too. COGS. Okay, just a minute, that's the asset account. Let's go back there. I renamed that the asset account, but that might not be. That's the sales account, so that goes into the product area. So let's cut that. That goes over here after the product, or in the product area. So we'll insert that there and rename that sales account, I think is the name of it. We can double check by looking over here. Product taxable income account is what Fishbowl wants that to be called. Income account. Alright. And then the asset account is just out of order, so we're going to put that in the right order. And notice Fishbowl uses a couple of other accounts that weren't on the QuickBooks file. Fishbowl also has an adjustment account, a scrap account, and a variance account. Now if we don't include those columns here, Fishbowl will just use the default, which is fine. So we can probably just leave that out. Okay. So you'll notice there is no expense account here. There's just an asset account, which might throw somebody off. So I'm going to explain what's going on here. So we have our inventory type parts with the part type ID 10. Those are mapped to your asset accounts. Let's filter out the inventory type parts. And we've got our labor and our service, our non-inventory, and all those. Those are mapped to a COGS and an expense account. If you remember going back to Fishbowl here, we'll pull that up again. The part types that are not inventory type parts are mapped to an expense and a COGS. 1, 2, 3. Go to, like for instance, shipping has this expense account. There's of course no asset account, equipment, an expense account, right? So for this spreadsheet import, this column serves as both an expense for the non-inventory type parts and an asset for the inventory type parts. So if you want to map these accounts to a specific account. Like we have different service type accounts here. And you may want to map those to different service type accounts from your chart of accounts. Let's pull up QuickBooks. To look at that. Go to Lists, Chart of Accounts. To see our options for individual part mapping. So we've got car lease, gas. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of accounts I'm looking for. Professional fees, maybe. Postage, office, miscellaneous, meals, tools. Repairs? No, that's computer repairs. Oh, here's different wages. Payroll, employee benefits. Not really the thing I'm looking for. I think I'll leave the service as default. You may want to map to a specific account here. You're welcome to, but in the manufacturing world, one thing we'll want to consider is mapping the parts to a specific account, which looks like may already be done because we pulled this from QuickBooks. We've got materials inventory, finished good inventory. Interesting, we don't have any WIP inventory. Now, there's two ways to handle WIP when you're going into the Fishbowl world. One way is to map a WIP type part to a QuickBooks WIP account. Okay? And what that would require is a multi-level bill of material in Fishbowl. So in Fishbowl, you can take your materials and build a component, and then take those components and build the finished good. Okay? So in that case, those component part numbers would be mapped to a WIP account in QuickBooks. Okay? So that's one way to handle WIP in Fishbowl. Notice the part number is mapped to an account in QuickBooks. The bill of material is not mapped to an account. So what some companies do is they say, okay, wait a minute. It takes us a week to build what we're working on. If we pick those materials and put them into the manufacturing area, do I have to wait a week before they go to WIP? I want them to be in WIP as soon as I move them to the manufacturing area. Okay? So there's a way to do that, and it's not involving accounts in QuickBooks. It's involving reports in Fishbowl. Okay? So we can create WIP type locations in Fishbowl. And in Fishbowl, when you pick your part, it moves from stock to that WIP type location. And then you can run a report to show what's in WIP. Okay? So there's two ways to track WIP. One is map a component type, mid-level bill of material type of part that's built, map that specifically to a WIP account in QuickBooks, or use Fishbowl location reporting to look at your WIP. Those are your two choices that you have to choose from to track WIP when you're moving to the Fishbowl world. So in this sample database that we're looking at, I'm not seeing WIP, and I just don't know the data well enough to know what would be WIP and what wouldn't. And it looks like it's mostly already mapped anyways. So you can most certainly pick apart, let's say This is a wheel assembly, so it looks like something that would be built and then used later. If that's the case, then we'd go back to QuickBooks and reference that. Work in progress utilities, work in process direct labor, work in progress indirect matter. Maybe? I don't know. Whatever, this is a practice file. We can do whatever we want, right? So let's open that. I just want to copy that. I'm going to copy that name. And watch what I do here. Notice how Fishbowl separates this with a colon. Fishbowl Inventory asset is the parent account, and then after the colon is the sub account. So that's the format it has to be in. Now right here I usually get asked the question, well, can't we just put the account number in? What if we number our accounts? The answer, unfortunately, is no. Fishbowl does not look at the number in the spreadsheet import. It looks at the account name. So you can put a number in if you're referencing, if you have thousands of parts, but you'll need to replace that number later on with the name of the account. And the reason I say that is I know some people know their numbers, their account numbers, better than their account names. And so that's one way to do it is, okay, put the numbers in as step 1 and then replace all the numbers with the account names in step 2. Alright, so we've got our COGS set up, our products, our product description, income account, our product, taxable. Now let's make sure these names are right, or we're going to get an error message. So we're going to reference our template again, and it says product taxable, income account. Okay. Oh, MPN, that translates to, in the Fishbowl world, vendor part number. Let's see if I got that right. Vendor part number, right. And then also we need a field here called default vendor. We'll mark that as true. If we don't do that and we try to use the auto PO features, and Fishbowl will not grab that vendor. So it is important to do that. You would think Fishbowl would automatically assign that true value, but it doesn't. Unless they change that in a very recent version. Cost. Okay, quantity, price break. Fishbowl has something similar to that for the vendor parts, but it doesn't work the way we're set up here with QuickBooks. Let me show you this, the vendor price breaks. Let's go here. So we've got a vendor, the vendor number, the last cost, the unit of measure, the last date, and we've got this minimum quantity. Last time I tested this, it was in 18.9, and I didn't see this feature change in 18.10. The auto PO feature was not picking up this minimum quantity. It was still ignoring it. This field has been here for a while. It's been here for like a year, and I've been watching it, waiting, hoping that features will be built on it, but nothing yet. I think usually that's how Fishbowl rolls out a feature, is it first adds the field to the database and then later adds the functionality to the field. So I'm still watching this. So if you need to manage vendor pricing based on quantity, then using the unit of measure field is your best bet. Okay. which brings us to the next field we're missing, and that is the vendor UOM. Okay, I'll just copy that and insert it here. And the vendor part number goes over here. Insert. Cut. Insert. Multiple range selections. I must have a filter on. Yeah, you can tell because those are blue over there. So I'm going to clear out the filter. Okay, now I can do this. Cut. Insert. Okay, let's see if we got that in order. Vendor, default vendor, vendor part number, cost, vendor UOM. So this is the vendor UOM. And Fishbowl does not call that preferred vendor, it just calls it vendor. Vendor part number. Okay. So this unit of measure, the purchase unit of measure, didn't pull over from QuickBooks. This cost, I believe, is just associated with this unit of measure here. Now, when you're working in the live file and you're trying to set this up and not just making a demo video, I believe is not good enough, right? Saying, I believe this is going to work. We want to make sure we get this unit of measure right and match it up with the cost. For this tutorial, I'm going to just cheat and say I believe, but when we're in the live file, we want to make sure, yeah, okay, this is the unit of measure that correlates with the cost. Yeah, because this quantity price break, yeah, I don't think you can buy 200 of these for 50 cents. So we're going to delete the quantity price break. And now we're pretty much ready to import this. There's one thing that I've learned by experience the Fishbowl will probably give us an error on, and that is tracking. So Fishbowl tracks serial numbers, lot numbers, revision levels, etc. These tracks lot, revision, expiration, serial number. I've had a problem with not having those in here before. I guess I could try them, see if this works. Let's see what error messages we get. Always expect an error message when you first do it. That way, if you lower your expectations, you won't be disappointed, right? So we're going to grab the PPVP prepared from QuickBooks from the desktop. And cross your fingers. Unknown unit of measure, build. Oh yeah, remember I added that unit of measure called build. We'll go to unit of measure. Click new. It's going to be a count type unit of measure. We'll call it build. Build. It's not going to like that. It wants 4 characters, and build has 5 characters. I could use the unit of measure piece instead, PC. Now, the ramifications of this you'll see on your reports. So Fishbowl has the sales order, the purchase order, the picking, the packing slip, all these reports that use units of measure, and the report uses 4 characters. So if you decide to use a unit of measure with 5 characters, then it's going to go to the next line. It's going to have 4 characters and then the 5th character on the next line, and it'll look absolutely retarded, and you'll need to customize your reports. If you absolutely have to have a unit of measure with more than 4 characters, you can do it. Fishbowl will let you, but it will it'll truncate it. So let's do this. Let's go back to the spreadsheet and not use build. And also, I'm noticing this box of 100. There's two reasons why I don't like this unit of measure. One is the quantity always comes, I don't know, wait, that's not bad. Yeah, the quantity comes first and then the unit of measure. 100 box of 100, right? So that's not bad. So there's only one reason I don't like this, and it's because it's just so long. So I would call this B100 instead, a BX of 100. And then that will look better in the Fishbowl world. And let's change that over on this spreadsheet too. Anywhere that it says box of 100, we'll do the find and replace. Where it says BX of 100, let's change it to B100. Replace all. What does it have there? Oh, I fat keyed it. Okay. And then build, we're just going to call that a piece. It says utility charge per build. Yeah, that's why I wanted to call it build. It just makes sense to call it build. Utility charge per build. I almost want to call it each, but I'll do piece. Alright, now let's try the import. I almost want to separate this and have a new video just on fixing import errors. PC, oh, if I create a unit measure PC, then I need to create it here, right? Of course. Piece, I before E, except after C, that's before E. It's sounding like A is a neighbor in a way. I thought that looked wrong. PC. Okay, file import, product vendor pricing, unknown vendor. Okay. Oh, unknown vendor equals, okay, it's reading something wrong over there. It thinks the unit of measure is the vendor, and it's not. Oh, so I named that wrong. Okay. Oh, it should be called vendor UOM. Somehow I missed that. Okay, file import, product vendor pricing. Now, since the first time we did this, let me go back. We already browsed this and it remembers it. So we don't have to click next every time. We can just click finish. Unknown vendor, Vin's Diner. Okay, let's see. We have vendors. Okay, it pulled vendors over, but it didn't pull Vin's Diner over. No Vin's Diner. Notice Vin's Diner. Well, I wonder what was wrong with Vin's Diner. These have apostrophes in them. There's nothing wrong with that. Vin's Diner. I wonder why Vin's Diner would not pull over from QuickBooks. I kind of want to go to the accounting configuration again and see if I can't just grab vendors and see what happens. Hold over 58 vendors. Those might just be the same vendors that we have. Still didn't get Vin's Diner. In QuickBooks, if we go to vendors, just want to look at Vin's Diner. I wonder if it's inactive. It doesn't exist. So Vin's Diner was assigned to the part in the item list, but later deleted, I guess. So the part number is most. Let's look at this. Most. Double click on that. Look at that. Preferred vendor, Vin's Diner, right there. But when you go to the vendor center and look for Vin's Diner, there's nothing. So alright, Vin's Diner has been deleted. I guess we don't use Vin's Diner anymore. So I'll just delete that. Clear contents. Save. File import. Part product vendor pricing. Next, finish. See what we get. Success! Woohoo! You always got to do a dance when you get that import in, right? That's the moment we were all waiting for. Yay! We got our parts in. We did the part product vendor pricing spreadsheet, converted it from QuickBooks. So, thanks for joining us. Always fun to do spreadsheet work and data massaging to get it into Fishbowl. Now, there's other data we need to get in, right? The inventory, and I think there was also reorder points, things like that. So join us for another video on putting those in. So don't forget to subscribe. If you made it to this end of the video, good job. This was a long video.